and welcome back to another episode of the Stripped Whole podcast, where we challenge our faith and our perspectives, and we find hope and encouragement in whatever season we find ourselves in. I'm so excited to be here with you today. Thank you so much for stopping by. Let's jump right in. We are back for another episode. I'm so excited to be in the studio again and recording. Hello to everybody on YouTube. Thank you for everyone who's been joining along. I cannot believe how this podcast is going. I'm blown away by the number of downloads. I'm blown away by the feedback. I'm so grateful to everyone who's coming in every week and following along. You will have to excuse me, I am in the middle of the world's worst heat wave, and so if you can hear a ceiling fan or the air conditioning, it was either that or not doing an episode. So you'll have to bear with me if you can pick that up in the background noise. I'm going to do my best to make sure that you can't hear it and you don't have to partake in the pain of this ridiculous heat. It's like a sauna. Oh, so we're here. I wanted to see how you're all doing. How is it going for you with Corona? It's Corona season. Everybody's got their own version of their story and their opinions, and for sure it's no different here in Israel. We are actually starting to return to life now. Our kids are back at school. They do have to wear masks and they do have to go by some very strict guidelines and health forms every day and temperature at the door and all these things, but they are back and life is starting to return to normal. And it's very strange because I think I've realized that through this season of Corona, I really have actually learned some things I want to keep in my life, and I found myself becoming very determined to fight for the things that I've discovered through going through this season of lockdown that I want to remain in my life when it returns to normal. And part of that is this whole slower pace. I don't want to return to the stress levels that I was living under before Corona. I want to keep those stress levels down. I want to be able to not be next to my phone. I want to be able to just pause and, just go at a slower pace and not get consumed by my to-do list. I so appreciated being able to hang out with my kids and to just be nesting at home and do a little project here and there and sort my garden out. And most importantly, I've really established an exercise plan and kind of rhythm that I really want to keep going. So 2 runs a week and 2 sessions of Pilates a week, and I'm loving it. It is just transforming my mental health, my physical health. My back never felt so good, and I'm really determined to try and maintain that in my life as we move forward. So always interested to know what people think about life before, life after. What's the difference going to be? What's your new normal going to be? And today's episode is a little bit about that kind of thing, because I really wanted to talk about struggles that we go through and why they might be there. It is one of the biggest things that I deal with in coaching and mentoring and the online courses that I run is people's struggle with the struggle. We find it really hard to reconcile why we might be going through certain things we might be going through. It might be that you are walking through a fire, or you're walking through a valley, or you have just been tested or pulled apart or stripped back, or there's all manner of ways of describing these struggles that we have, but there's always a struggle somewhere for everyone. And I think a lot of times that I come across, especially women that I deal with, is there's just a real battle to understand why. Why am I going through this struggle? What is God doing in this season? What is it that he's up to? And we're so trained by the world to blame God actually for those things, and to really attribute a blame somewhere, or to just get a bit angry or maybe a bit bitter towards God for allowing these things to happen. And I just wanted to take some time today to really talk through why it is we might go through these trials. Why is it that God allows struggles in our lives? And I think there's always two sides to this coin. And I've learned this through my own life, and I've learned it through watching many, many other people's lives. There's two things that tend to be going on here. The first is that we vastly underestimate the enemy. Now, during this corona season, we were really, really sad to lose a very close family member due to COVID. And it was very, very difficult to say goodbye to that particular family member because they had a very big influence in our lives. And I think one of the most impacting things I remember him telling me was that he really believed that the enemy was in heaven and knew and saw and witnessed the writing of our destinies before he was expelled from heaven. And so he knows the destiny on our lives. I know a lot of people might really struggle with that concept, but I've actually found it to be a real key for understanding things that go on in my life. See, if the enemy knows what God's plan for my life is, then he knows exactly where to attack and what to attack in order to try and stall that plan. I think he's a lot cleverer than we give him credit for. Now, the thing I really want to stress here is that we don't want to give him too much credit. He is defeated, but he is cunning and he is beautiful and he knows how to do what he's doing. The thing to remember here, though, is that the enemy is not creative. That is the part about us that drives him most insane. He wanted to be God, he wanted to be like God, he wanted to be worshipped. And I think the thing that drives him most nuts about humanity is the fact that humanity is made in God's image, and they are creative, and they are made in his image. They're made to represent him. They're a reflection of him, and he's not. And that's what he wanted. A friend of mine recently said this on an Instagram post, and I loved it. She said that the thing that torments the enemy more than anything is your sheer existence, because it represents everything he can't have. And I think that that is what drives his attack on us. It is a rage and a jealousy over what God has created in us that he never got to have. I think one of the things that I have come to see in those around me and through my own story is how precise the enemy is able to attack. And I think that's what's convinced me that this family member who shared that story about what he believed really rang true for me, because it suddenly made so many things make sense. Suddenly it was like, oh, so that's why the enemy was able to attack that specific thing, because God had a plan for that. So one of the first things that I tend to ask people when I start out coaching, mentoring, and having these calls with people is, what is your greatest area of struggle? And everybody has their own answer to that question. It can be self-worth, it could be my body, it could be my value, my calling. I don't know what my gifts are. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I struggle with fear. I struggle with all kinds of things. We all know what the struggles in life are, but everybody has their own struggle. And for me, that's the first key. We're all unique, and we all have our own area of struggle. And to me, that represents exactly the flip. This is my thing. This is what I like to do. Flip it on its head. Okay, here's your area of struggle. Maybe that area of struggle is a struggle because it represents your greatest gift. Maybe it represents your greatest strength. And somebody out there doesn't want you functioning in that strength, doesn't want that gift to be invested in. And so the enemy becomes an expert in a very targeted attack. Because let me tell you something, a believer who is functioning in their gifting and serving the kingdom with that gift is the most powerful tool in God's hand. And the enemy knows that. And he will go to town on destroying gifts and on putting doubt in our minds about our gifts, or just confusing us or hassling us enough that we don't pay attention to our gifts. And I'll get to why gifts are important in a minute. But I just wanted to really drive this point home. The enemy knows what your gifts are, and he knows your most powerful area, and he knows your most impacting part of your life and your story. And he will go to town on destroying that because he doesn't want you making any impact. And I think this has really become a key for people to suddenly understand why they've had a struggle in their lives. And I think everybody has a different kind of attack. The enemy is very good at tailor making his attacks. He is cunning, and he can convince, and he can sow lies, and he can accuse. We're so easily convinced by some of those things that he says. You know, the other day I was on Facebook and I was just scrolling, and there's a girl that I follow on there, and I can't pronounce her surname, but she is one of my favorite. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, but she's one of my favorite accounts to follow because she just makes some really good visual representations of things we walk through in life. And this particular video just had 2 jars with her in the middle, and all you heard was amazing and beautiful compliments about her. And every time you heard one, a little kind of M&M was dropped into one of the vases, and she was like feeling all good about herself, and she was enjoying hearing all these compliments. And this jar was filling up and filling up and filling up until it was really full. And then all of a sudden there was one negative comment, and an M&M dropped onto the other side into the other vase. And all her attention went onto that vase, and she dismissed the jar that was full, and she smashed it onto the floor, and she picked up the vase with one negative M&M, and she hugged it close and walked away. And I was so blown away by that picture, because I just thought, wow, that's what we do, isn't it? You know, God's word is full of truth, and he uses and works with his children to encourage other children. And we need to encourage each other and build each other up, because it only takes one negative thing and one lie and one doubt from the enemy to plant in us, and everything positive and everything true can be dismissed by us, and we grab onto that lie and we hold that close, we take it in and we walk away with it. And I think the enemy knows how effective a lie is compared to a truth, but what he doesn't understand is that the truth always wins. But that's up to us to take those truths in. We have to build on truth. We have to rest in truth. We have to feed on truth. Otherwise, the lies become louder. So really, the first side of this coin is all to do with the enemy knowing your destiny. He knows your call. He knows your gifts. He's watched. He's seen. He knows how to launch an effective attack on us. Now, I am not about to be giving too much credit to the enemy. I don't think we should, because he is defeated and he is done, but he isn't done yet. So while we shouldn't live in fear of the enemy, there is an understanding of his tactics that maybe could help us. Ask yourself the question, what is my greatest struggle? Because you might find it is in direct relationship to your greatest area of gifting and your greatest area of impact and the most powerful tool that you have for the kingdom. And if that's something that you want to discuss further or you want to look into further, I would just love to invite you to drop me a line through the website, which is in the show notes, and let's talk about doing some coaching on that, because that's my favorite thing. It absolutely releases people into understanding further who they are, what their identity is, what they're made for, what their calling is, and why this struggle has been there. It actually gives you a reason to deal with the struggle, because you start to understand that it's there for a reason, because that is a threat to the kingdom of darkness. And so it brings an amazing amount of freedom and understanding to the difficulties that we've had. The second side to the coin is that, yes, the enemy may be launching a war on you. But where is God in all of this? Why isn't God just stopping it? Why isn't God just, intervening and allowing us to have this happy little life? I just don't think that's how God works. I think God always is looking for partners who choose to interact with him, who choose to go with him. And I think once we've understood this dynamic of the battle and the war that there is over our gifts and our destiny, we're in a position where we can choose again to go with him. And what I love about God is that he always redeems everything. He is God of restoration. He can redeem the time. He can redeem the struggle. He can redeem anything that the enemy intended for evil. He can redeem it for good. And so every struggle that you've had and every valley that you've walked through can be turned on its head and become a tool for you, and a tool for the kingdom, and a tool for God. And he's done that for me 100 times over. He has taken my valleys and turned them into mountaintops, and he's taken my struggles and he's made them my most powerful testimony. And let me tell you, there is power in story. And I think that's something that we really underestimate. The reason why we have our faith is because a story was written down. And I believe it was a true story. I don't think it's just a storybook. I think it's history. But I really believe that we underestimate the power of story, because it gives us an emotional attachment. It gives us something to form our worldview. It gives us something to structure our beliefs on. It gives so much. And we've all been in those meetings when we've heard these amazing testimonies of people who've got stories about what God's done in their lives. And it moves us, and it makes us worship, and it makes us give glory and praise to God because of a story we've heard. And I've seen this work both negatively and positively, but I really believe that God loves story. He loves when our story points to him, and he loves when our story gives glory to him, and he loves when our struggle and our biggest area of, let's call it weakness for a second, when our greatest area of weakness can become a story of victory because of him. That is definitely my story, my witness, my testimony. I went through things as a kid and as a teenager that directly attacked my greatest gifts. And I know other people who've had the same story, and I would love to get them on here soon. Season 2 is going to be full of guests, by the way, but I'm going to get one of my favourite stories. I'm going to get her in on an episode, and she'll tell you exactly this. Her greatest area of gifting and calling was very precisely and directly attacked to the most extreme levels, and her story is ridiculously powerful as a result. And it happened to me as well. My greatest area of gifting is loving people well and trusting easily and going in deep. And guess what? That was the area that was attacked. My trust of people was attacked. I was betrayed. There was trust that was abused. And a few times over, it was not just a one-off. The enemy doesn't try once and then fail and go, oh, well, I gave it a shot. He goes again and he goes again and he goes again, because he knows how powerful a gift is in the hand of God. And he'll go and he'll go and he'll go and he'll try to destroy that gift. And he won't let up until he sees that it's working. But God can redeem, and God does redeem. And yes, we might need to do a bit of healing. We might need to go through a process. We might need to have some help in that process. But it is always redeemable. Nothing is final. And that's what happened in my life for sure. I went through things that directly attacked my greatest giftings of loving people, trusting people, and opening myself up. I was told by people that I should put my heart on God, and I shouldn't trust anyone, and I shouldn't open up like I did, because it's only going to result in hurt, and it was only going to result in, all these terrible things they would list to me. After a certain number of times of hearing that and being betrayed and being hurt and seeing that they're actually right, I did put my heart on God, And I would say that I did the reverse of what Ezekiel talks about. I took my heart of flesh and I made it a heart of stone. And I worked very hard at doing that because I didn't want to get hurt again. And I didn't want to have my trust betrayed again. And I didn't ever want to be in a position where people could do that to me. So I turned my heart of flesh very deliberately into a heart of stone. And everything went wrong in my life, let me tell you that. My faith was utterly decimated, and all kinds of things went very wrong over a long season, until I realized the root problem was that I had deliberately taken God's creation and destroyed it. And it was man-made problem. I had taken my heart and frozen it. So God took me on this process. Once I realized and repented and understood what I had done, he took me on a process of unfreezing my heart. And let me tell you something, the process of unfreezing my heart was so much more painful than any hurt I would have had along the way had I not done that. I really learned my lesson there. I had to work so hard to undo those thought patterns, to trust people intentionally again, to open up again, to take the guard down and let people in and actually rediscover who I was made to be. It was painful, my goodness, but so worth it, because suddenly I was alive again. When we shut our gifts down, we actually are not fully alive anymore, because God created us a certain way. And when we don't function in that, we're actually denying a part of his creation, and we're devaluing it and not in agreement with it. So as I unfroze my heart and started to actually function in the original design that he'd made me in, I was able to start stepping out into my calling. And that was when I realized that God had allowed so many of these things to happen in my life because he wanted my story to give him glory. And that's what I was able to do, because the enemy had waged a war on my gifts and on my character and on the very areas of my strengths. The redemption of those things just made the glory even bigger that goes to God, because he's been able to reverse something that the enemy thought he'd finished. And I think that's what the enemy doesn't really ever understand, that the greater the attack that he launches, the greater the victory it is, and the greater the glory is that goes to God. And that's what I love about this story. God understands the power of story. The enemy does not. He's not interested in going on a story and creating a story, because he can't create. He can only use what's already there. And that's why he uses your past, your fears. That's why he uses things and he throws them at you, and he just stands there and accuses you. In fact, the other day I was on an online call for one of the courses, and we ended up having this whole discussion about how he is an accuser. And one of the things I recently spoke to about with my kids was how heaven is like a courtroom drama. And on the one hand, you've got the prosecutor who is laying all the accusations to the father about me. I'm the plaintiff. I'm sat there. I can't do anything. On the other hand, you've got the barrister who is defending the defendant and is telling the truth to the father. And you have both of these going on. It says in the Bible that the Son is continually before the Father on my behalf. And I'm a very visual person, and so this picture really helps me understand what's going on, because it's up to me who I go into agreement with. I can go into agreement with the enemy and believe what he's saying and agree with the lies, agree with the accusations, and trust me, that's happened many times. And sometimes we don't realize that we're agreeing with a lie, but there's always the Son who's always telling the truth. And what I love about this picture is the enemy can use all the stuff from our past, things that we've repented of, things that we've dealt with and moved on from. he likes to throw them back into the mix, back into the story, back into the narrative. But the son is stood there and he's saying, I'm sorry, I don't even understand what you're talking about. I have no recollection of that, because he doesn't remember those things, because we've repented of them. They are erased. They're erased from him. So actually, it's only us and the enemy that can remember those things. So we have to choose who we could get into agreement with. Who are we going to side with in that courtroom? Are we going to go with the accuser or the defender? And that's become something that I really think about a lot, because the enemy is very good at chucking stuff up. When we least expect it, suddenly you can have this old memory of something you did really wrong many years ago, repented of and haven't thought of since, and suddenly it can be right there in front of you and you're like, oh my goodness. And it can debilitate you, and it can really cause doubt and fear to creep in when you're in the middle of functioning now as a redeemed, forgiven, restored person who is walking out their destiny, walking out their gifts. Suddenly the enemy can just totally derail you by bringing something up, and we have to choose, am I coming into agreement with this, or am I going to believe that this has actually been forgiven, erased, and is no longer relevant? I think it takes quite a lot of awareness. It's a very intentional thing to do this, but it takes a lot of awareness to do that, and it's something that I think a lot of people haven't thought of doing. You know, when you have these fears, when you have these doubts, when these struggles come up, we have to ask where they're coming from. It may be that God is highlighting something we need to deal with, and that is fine, and we should listen to that. But if it comes up and it has a whole attachment of guilt and fear and all these things that do not come from God, then we have to assume that it's the enemy and he is going to town on an attack, and we have to decide how we're going to interact with it. We can come into agreement with it, we can be aligned with it, and we can come under it and allow it to dictate, or we can see it for what it is and counteract it with truth, and actually use that as an indication that I'm doing something really well here, because the enemy would not be attacking me if I was being ineffective. If this is the level of attack I'm receiving for walking in my destiny and functioning in my gifts, then I'm doing something right, because the enemy would not be bothered if I was not making a dent on the kingdom of darkness. So as a summary, if you're going through a trial, ask yourself 2 questions. Number 1, what is this struggle in? Is that an indication of my greatest gifting? And secondly, if God is allowing me to walk through this trial, 2 things are going on. I am being refined. I am being called up higher. He is asking me to elevate my walk. He wants my story to give him the glory. So let's partner with God more in this attack, in this struggle, in this season, because there is always an elevation available for us when we want it. So I hope that is an encouragement to you. And like I said earlier, if you are going through something and you do not know what is going on and you feel like you might want a bit of guiding through this struggle, let's have a chat. I would love to help you discover the treasure that is available to you in this season. And there is always treasure available in any season, whether it is a valley or a mountaintop. There is always treasure to find. There is always a gift that God has for us in that season if we're willing to see it. So get on the website, drop me a line. I would love to talk to you. The link's in the show notes. And I cannot wait to join you again next week with another episode. That's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me on this Stripped Whole podcast. If you've liked what you've heard today, please leave a rating and a comment down below so that we can hear your feedback and do better next time. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next episode.